Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the ASAP Pathway podcast. And I have the honor of co-hosting today with another one of my partners. And this is such a rare treat for me, Dr. Michelle Weddle. So she's here today. And I just can't wait to dive in with our guest today. And I'm very honored to have you, Dr. Robert Lustig. Nice to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacy and
I,
Michelle.
Thank you. And we know you're a busy man and taking the time, we just very much appreciate it. And I've got a bio here. I would like to introduce you to our audience. And for those of you who do not know Dr. Lustig, um, I would like to just give you, again, an abbreviated version. We have so many amazing guests. I feel like their bios just do not do them any justice to all the things they're accomplishing because I'm trying to keep it short and sweet so we can dive in. So without further ado, Dr. Robert Lustig. He's a emeritus professor of pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology and member of the Institute for Health Policy Studies at UCSF. He is a neuroendocrinologist with expertise in obesity, diabetes, metabolism, and nutrition. He's one of the leaders of the current anti-sugar movement that is changing the food industry. He has dedicated his retirement from clinical medicine to help fix the food supply any way he can, to reduce human suffering, and to salvage the environment by interacting with all stakeholders to bring them together around a common vision of metabolic health, being protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain. Dr. Lustig graduated from MIT in 1976 and received his MD from Cornell University Medical College in 1980. He also received his Master's of Studies in Law at the University of California, Hastings College of the Law in 2013. He's the author of the popular books Fat Chance, 2012, The Hacking of the American Mind, 2017, and Metabolical, 2021. He is the Chief Science Officer of the nonprofit Eat Real and is a member of the Nutrition Task Force of the American Dental Association. And that is how Tracy heard you. Um, I mean, you just look like such an underachiever, Dr. Lustig.
Yeah, I know, I know. My mother still says it.
Oh, well, again, we're just happy to have you here. And part of what we discuss a lot, and we were talking a little bit before we hit the record button, we're seeing more and more coming out regarding diet, regarding health, our children being probably one of the sickest generations. We might actually outlive our own kids because,
Um,
yeah.
that's what the data show right now. The uh, uh, life expectancy, is, very clearly on its way down 5 years in a row. Now,
Hmm.
part of that was COVID, but in fact, it was occurring before COVID, and it has actually, continued to decline past COVID. So, we are definitely on a downward trajectory, and that is part of why RFK was approved as HHS secretary yesterday, just because he recognizes that children should not be getting chronic disease. And, the American populace is with him on that.
They are.
And
Whether
I'm with him,
whatever
and I'm
side
with him
you,
on that.
yes, whatever side of look, whatever side of the aisle you land on, everyone agrees our kids are sick. We got asthma, we got allergies, we've got autoimmune diseases in children, cancers in children.
Indeed.
This was such a rare thing, and now it's just common. We have spectral issues. We don't know what's going on.
Right.
We do know that the diets are highly processed. We know that airway health is going in the toilet. Sleep health is going in the toilet. Um,
All the above.
yeah. And we just,
And most importantly, metabolic health is going in the toilet.
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And these are and immunologic health and also mental health. Um, there is no health parameter that you can point to that's actually doing well right now.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And you talk about modern medicine in your book, Dr. Lustig, and how a lot of our mainstream medical modalities treat downstream of the problem. And
Exactly.
we're not really looking upstream to try to see what is causing the issue. So where do we start?
So I, that's exactly right, Michelle. Ultimately, you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. And we, unfortunately, for the last 50 years, have been led astray. We've been led astray in two ways. The first way we were led astray was that our food was healthy. And the second way we were led astray was that our drugs cured disease.
Mm.
And neither of those are true. Okay. We are the country where we say there's a pill for that. Well, there is a pill for that, but it's only for the symptoms of that. It's not for the either cure or reversal of that.
And it's so
And
easy and so good to just take a pill for something.
well, that's our mantra, now not only do we have pills, we have shots.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's still the same thing. We're treating the symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. As an example, high LDL. High LDL is not the disease. High LDL is a symptom of the disease. The statin only treats the LDL. It doesn't treat the underlying pathophysiology. As an example, if you take all of the data on statin use for primary prevention of heart disease, how many days extra do you get to live
Mm.
if you took a statin for your high LDL?
I
No idea.
mean, I think a lot, right? Just because it's one of the things mainstream medicine will say you have high LDL, this is what we should take. This is the first step. We need to get you on this pill in order to get you in a healthier trajectory. You'll live longer, you'll have a better life.
But
Well,
what's
you
the
drank the
facts?
Kool-Aid. You
Right.
just
What's
drank
the
the Kool-Aid.
facts?
Right, right.
Okay. The answer is 4 days.
Oh, get an extra 4 days.
You get an extra 4 days.
What you gonna do with those whole 4 days?
And what are you going to do with all that money that went out the door paying for it?
Ooh, right, for 4 extra days.
Or the side
Oh,
effects from
and
these
and the
statins.
20% increase in diabetes because of it.
Exactly. The side effects from those statins,
And the
which,
reason is because the LDL is not the problem. The LDL is a manifestation of the problem. The problem, okay, is what's going on in the liver. Okay, and we're not touching that. And the statin is not answering that. Example, high glucose, high blood glucose. So we have insulin, we have oral hypoglycemics, we have metformin. Metformin's coming closer to solving the problem than the others, which is why now it's first line therapy. But the fact of the matter is, lowering the blood glucose doesn't solve the problem. There are numerous studies that show that intensive care of diabetes, it reduces the retinopathy, the nephropathy, the neuropathy, the small vessel disease. But you end up dying at exactly the same time from either cardiovascular disease or cancer.
mm,
You've traded in one set of pathologies, the microvascular problems, for the macrovascular problems, the vascular smooth muscle uh, uh, growth, okay, or the glandular growth, because insulin is itself a growth factor. So anything that raises insulin is going to actually shorten your life. Okay, and we are all suffering from this thing called insulin resistance. And
yeah.
insulin resistance is really the core manifestation of this metabolic onslaught that we are currently experiencing. Insulin resistance is at the basis of all the diseases we are dying from. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease. Those are all the diseases of insulin resistance. So what is insulin resistance? And I can sum that up in 2 words: mitochondrial dysfunction.
Hmm.
Mitochondria. So what are mitochondria? Everyone has heard the term because everyone took biology in 10th grade. Okay, but no one remembers what they are. Well, it turns out they're really, really important. And the whole world needs to basically relearn this, part of medicine. Okay. Everybody knows what the nucleus is because we, learned all about genetics and DNA and molecular biology and now stem cells and what have you. So everybody knows about the nucleus. Everybody knows about DNA. Well, it turns out the mitochondria, I think, are actually more important. Okay. If you look at the diseases that genetics have fixed, there are none. There's zero. Okay. And if you look at the diseases that mitochondria cause, there are no treatments for any of them. Okay. And they're 75% of all healthcare dollars. So we have spent the last 50 years focusing on the wrong part of the cell. We should be focused on the mitochondria. So what are the mitochondria? They are the little energy burning factories inside each cell. What they do is they take the energy that's found in food, the chemical energy of food, and they convert it to the chemical energy that your cell can use to power itself. And that energy has a name. It's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
Oh, are we getting into the Krebs cycle now? Oh, no.
Well, partly, yeah.
That was part of my dental school nightmares. No.
Well, yeah, and you never heard about it since, and that's a problem.
That is the problem.
That is the problem. Okay. Fact of the matter is, ATP powers every single aspect of your existence. And it turns out that your mitochondria have to be at 100% peak efficiency to make all the ATP that you need each day. It's estimated that each of us either break down and reform 68 million molecules of ATP every day. 68 million have to be broken down and then rebuilt back up. And mitochondria are responsible for that. So when they're working at peak efficiency, then you have all the energy you need. But when they're not working at peak efficiency, when there's something interfering with their function, that means you're not getting the throughput of that ATP that you need, which means ultimately that your cells are starved. They don't have the energy resources that they need to be able to do their jobs. And that ultimately leads to a host of various problems. Obviously, fatigue, inability to sleep properly, inability to think, brain fog, ultimately neuropsychiatric problems, irritability, and depression, and ultimately systemic disease as well. So that ATP is necessary for your pancreas to be able to make the insulin molecule to be able to release it. That ATP is necessary for the liver to be able to detoxify the toxins that are actually affecting your body. Okay, that ATP is necessary for, growth and for burning. I mean, it is the result of burning, but it's what powers every aspect. It's necessary for hormone secretion. It's necessary for hormone action. It's necessary for growth. It's necessary for everything that goes on in your life. And if you have a 100% efficient mitochondrion, you're going to be fine. If you have a 99% efficient mitochondrion, you're not going to be fine. That's how, what's the word? That's how sensitive this phenomenon is. So then the question is, all right, what are causing your mitochondria to not work right? And the answer is there's a whole host of things. There's a boatload. Okay. For instance, ionizing radiation. We learned that from the astronauts because they show mitochondrial dysfunction in their urine, the metabolites in their urine. When they come back to Earth, okay, we can actually assess their mitochondrial function because ionizing radiation affect mitochondria. Because mitochondrial DNA, is subject to radiation the same way the rest of our DNA is. Okay, and there's radiation everywhere.
Right.
From your cell phone. Start
Right.
there.
I mean, our kids are on the cell phone all the time. We travel so much
Of
more
course.
nowadays on the airplane.
Right.
And
Absolutely. Air pollution, okay, causes mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay. There are toxins in the water that cause mitochondrial dysfunction. Right? But ultimately, the big kahuna, the one that matter, there are chemicals in the environment that cause mitochondrial dysfunction. But the big thing, the one that is, across the board and very clearly, specifically related to all of these chronic metabolic diseases and this phenomenon of insulin resistance is our diet.
Mm.
Is our diet. Okay, that's the big one. And within our diet, there are multiple things that can affect mitochondrial function negatively. There are also a couple of things, by the way, that can affect it positively. Okay, like omega-3s can affect it positively. Glucose affects it positively, makes mitochondria work better, activates two enzymes in mitochondria that make it work better. All right. Polyphenols help mitochondria work better. Okay. And they're in various fruits, vegetables, dark chocolate, green tea. Okay.
We
But
like that, the dark chocolate part.
well, it's got to be dark. Because the milk chocolate, it's got the toxin to mitochondrial function. And that one is called sugar. It turns out the molecule in sugar that is sweet, the molecule called fructose, also the molecule that causes dental caries, okay? It's a molecule that causes all sorts of problems, okay? Turns out to be a mitochondrial toxin. It interferes with three separate enzymes that are necessary for mitochondria to do their job. One is called AMP kinase. That's the fuel gauge on the liver cell. That's the enzyme that says, hey, there's not enough energy in this cell. Let's make more mitochondria. Okay, so a little negative feedback there. But if your AMP kinase is dead, then you can't do it. You can't raise your mitochondrial biogenesis. Therefore, you stay energy depleted. Number two, it inhibits an enzyme called ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain. This is necessary to take fatty acids to break them up into two carbon fragments so that they can be burned in the Krebs cycle in order to make more ATP. And finally, the last enzyme is called CPT1, carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1. This is the enzyme that regenerates carnitine. Carnitine is the shuttle mechanism by which the fatty acids get from outside the mitochondria to inside the mitochondria so that they can be burned in the first place. All right. So the sum total of which is that fructose, this sweet molecule in sugar, one half of the sugar molecule, okay, is, the sucrose molecule, or high fructose corn syrup, if you will, is a mitochondrial toxin. And it's in all of our food.
Yes, it is.
And it turns out the more sugar you consume, the sicker you are and the quicker you die because of this mitochondrial ATP depletion. So, what are we going to do about that? That's the question. And that is ultimately the question that this administration is going to have to answer.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the majority. I just even had a new patient visit with a 1-year-old, and part of that is I go over, let's talk about diet. Let's talk about, what are you feeding the child? Are they chewing? We went beautiful craniofacial development. And you see so many parents walking in with these applesauce packets. They're not chewing their food. So not only are they not getting any fiber, they're not chewing. Everything's full of preservatives, additives, sugars. I mean, these kids have no chance. And it's other
So there's a
cultures aren't
problem.
always like this.
There's a problem with each of those things. So let's talk about the food itself, and then we'll talk about the fact that kids aren't chewing. Okay, because they're both related, but they're two
Yes,
separate things.
they are.
But
Correct.
they're
Yep.
related. So in the food, okay, we actually wrote this up 2 years ago in Frontiers in Nutrition. Okay, in the food, there are three things that you have to be able to do to promote metabolic health. They are protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain.
Mhm.
Any food that does all three of those is healthy, whether it's ultra processed or real, doesn't matter. Any food that does none of the three is poison, whether it's ultra processed or real or not, doesn't matter. Just so happens that ultra processed food does none of the three, and real food usually does all three of the three. Okay, that's why real food works and ultra processed food doesn't. Ultra processed food is the problem. Okay, and 67% of the item, sorry, 73% of the items in the American grocery store
Yeah.
are ultra processed. Okay, so you actually have to like put some thought into what you should buy in the store. And of course, no one does, and no one can read 40,000 labels. And so it becomes a major problem. We have by the way, we have a fix for that. And we'll talk about that at the end. Nonetheless, those are the three precepts. Protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain. Well, sugar floods the liver, sugar starves the gut, and sugar is toxic to the brain. So sugar's bad, and sugar's in 67% of the items that the children eat.
Now, just
Okay.
just for the people listening, some people hear sugar, and I say this to patients, they hear sugar, and I'm like, that's carbohydrates are the first thing to digest, and it's in your mouth right away. The digestion of carbohydrates begins right away in the mouth, and then everything else starts to digest.
Saliva starts cleaving,
So
the
it
amylase in
starts
the
it
saliva
right away.
cleaves glucose is off starch, and you get a
So
glucose.
there you go, starch. So when I talk about sugars with parents and have the nutritional counseling, they're like, oh, no, my kid doesn't eat any, they don't do sugars. We don't keep candy and stuff in the house, but they have breads, crackers, pastas, snack cakes, different things that they think are,
Yogurts.
yes, yogurt full. I mean, it's like in their mind, they think they're doing the right thing because they don't have hard candy, gummy bears, and all that stuff in the house. So when you say sugars, are you including all like processed starches, like pastas? Are you including breads?
So starches, so bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, lentils, legumes, okay, they are polymerized glucose. There's no fructose in those. Now, often fructose will be added anyway. That's called a pastry.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Yeah,
pastry.
the starch and the sugar and the fat, by the way. So um, uh, but starch in and of itself is not the problem. Now,
So, like a
starch,
potato,
yeah,
rice. Right.
it's not good, but it's not terrible. Okay. It raises your insulin, but if you're insulin sensitive, your insulin go up, it'll also come straight down. The problem is when you're insulin resistant and your insulin goes up and it stays up. So insulin's the bad guy in the story, and we have to do everything we can to get the insulin down. Now, does glucose make insulin go up? Yes. But if you're insulin sensitive, the insulin rise will only be brief. And
And what
that's,
period
just
is
part of
brief?
life. Huh?
What is a good brief period? What is a period that we say brief? What does
Well,
that
if your insulin goes up, it should go up within 30 minutes and it should come down within 45 to 60 after you've eaten. That's what it should do, but that's not what it is doing. What it's doing is it's going up slower because the pancreas has its own problems making the insulin because of this mitochondrial dysfunction we talked about. And because the glucose is high, the insulin has to stay up in order to try to drive the glucose into cells to clear it, except that the cells aren't working properly and the insulin's not working properly. So it has to stay up longer in order to effectuate that reduction. And so what you have is instead of a quick peak and a quick fall, you have this slow rise, this plateau, and then finally a fall
Mm.
at around 120 or even 180 minutes. That's insulin resistance. That is the phenomenon of insulin resistance. And we now know that insulin resistance is the manifestation of mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you are insulin resistant, it means your mitochondria aren't doing their job, which means you have to tend to your mitochondria. Well, we're not,
Is there
unless
a
you
way to reverse someone that has insulin resistance? Because some people, I'll hear them talk about it and they're like, well, I'm just insulin resistant. Like it's a lifelong sentence.
No,
How do
it
we
doesn't
tend
have
to
to
a
be.
mitochondria?
It doesn't have to be. I mean, there are people who will tell you that, and there are doctors who will tell you that,
Right.
but it doesn't have to be that. It will be that if you don't change your diet.
Correct.
That's how it happened in the
In the
first
first
place.
place.
Hmm.
Okay. You know, you know, Einstein's theory of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a
And
different
different
result. If you don't fix your diet, nothing's going to change. It's just that simple. But we know because there's a company called Virta Health, okay, and their job is to reverse type 2 diabetes using a ketogenic diet. And the reason is because ketones don't need insulin. And so ketones turn out to be a very good nutritive substrate. And because it doesn't need insulin, okay, it keeps the insulin down. Okay, so there are, and also ketones are a signaling molecule for mitochondrial biogenesis also,
Mm.
one called sirtuins. So what they do is they use the ketogenic diet and they can reverse 77% of their patients with type 2 diabetes. Reverse it. And
Virta Health. How do you spell that? VERTA?
no, VIRTA.
VIRTA. Okay.
Okay. And they can do that, and appropriately so. It turns out you don't have to go straight keto. You can actually do this by just getting the sugar out of your diet and adding fiber. So, there are ways to do it, but all of the ways to do it mean fixing your diet. And our diet isn't being fixed.
Mm-mm.
So, anyone who's listening to this, if you've got type 2 diabetes, it is not a death sentence. It is not a chronic, progressive, degenerative disease with no treatment or cure. That's what the American Diabetes Association tells you. It is completely not true. But if you don't change your diet, then everything they said is true.
What is so mind-boggling to me, and I had Dr. Sarush Zagi, he's an ENT. He was on a few episodes ago, and we just talked about the culture of medical school and dental school. That being more of, instead of health driven, it's more about pharmaceutical driven.
Indeed. That's
They're
right.
learning what medications you give for what diseases versus how do we fix it in the first place. And he mentioned that his wife um, actually has Instagram that she shows different foods. So it could be Quaker oats that's approved in the United States. That same strawberries and cream Quaker oats to be sold in Europe has to have different ingredients
Yes.
because they do not allow the majority of the ingredients in their foods that the United States does.
And that's one reason why we have more diabetes than they do.
And so it is just mind-boggling to me. Like, we know so much. We know so much. There's with social media, it's being exposed. It's like, what gives? Why isn't there being actionable change?
Because the food industry is doing what the USDA and the FDA want.
And what is the benefit of adding all these crazy preservatives and additives when they're made in the same factory being shipped to Europe with healthier ingredients in the Quaker oats, but then they make the less healthy for the US? Is it cheaper?
Yeah,
Is it
it's absolutely cheaper. Number one, it's absolutely cheaper. And number two, people like it. Kids like the bright colors.
mm,
Kids like the extra sugar. The food industry has learned that the more they add, the more you buy.
it's like, are they, I
So
feel like everybody's in cahoots.
Because sugar is addictive. Well, they are in
that's the word,
cahoots
right?
because
Are we addicting our children to this?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yes. Oh,
just remember that the US government makes 56 billion dollars a year from tariffs from food. So, they're in this for their own purposes as well. So this is not going to get fixed at the government level, or well, maybe now it will. I don't know. We'll have to see exactly what, make America healthy again means. I haven't yet figured that out. All right. But the fact of the matter is, up till now, the USDA and the FDA have basically been asleep at the switch, or they've been co-opted by those industries that they're supposed to regulate,
Mm.
called agency capture.
So if it's not, like what you said, Stacy, oatmeal and oatmeal. The message that we get sometimes is eat oatmeal. And when general public looks at it and they have oatmeal with peaches and creams, oatmeal with this in their head, it's oatmeal. But it's oatmeal is not necessarily oatmeal depending on what else they add, how they make it.
The fact is that if it's instant oatmeal, it's not oatmeal. It's
Well,
that simple. And
and
the
you,
reason is because instant oatmeal can't have any fiber in it
mm,
because the fiber won't get smooth in the microwave.
So how can general public understand or know the difference or be informed?
Well, not from the food label, that's for sure.
right.
The food label is a piece of crap and has always been, but it's what the food industry was able to wangle out of the FDA back in 1990, the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of 1990. Um, it's not what's in the food. The food label tells you what's in the food. It's not what's in the food. That's not what's important. It's what's been done to the food. That's what's important. What did they add and what they take away?
Mm.
All food is inherently good. It's what we do to the food that's not, but that's not listed on the label.
Yeah. So you said earlier you had a fix. Like the average
Right.
person listening to this, there's so much parent guilt and fatigue, and
Yes.
parents are one healthy kid. I mean, no parent would say, yes, I want to feed my kids stuff that makes them sick. No one would say that, but that
Right.
is what's happening. So,
So,
how do we have actionable? I mean, because like you said, no one's reading the labels.
right.
You
So,
had a fix for that, you said.
yes. So remember the three things that matter: protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain. How does that translate into actionable items in terms of food? There are four things that need to happen. Number one, we got to get the sugar down. Number two, we got to get the fiber up. Number three, we got to get omega-3s in because those are anti-inflammatory and also neuroprotective. And lastly, we have to get the emulsifiers out.
Mm.
Emulsifiers in all the ultra-processed foods because they're what hold fat and water together. An emulsifier is a detergent. It's Tide. Okay. It's what you put in your clothes washer to lift the stain out of your clothes. Well, what happens when you swallow a detergent? Burns a hole in your intestine. Okay. Causes gut inflammation, which
Yes.
leads to systemic inflammation, which then leads to mitochondrial dysfunction.
And emulsifiers are in our food.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
What purpose do they serve? Why are they adding that?
Holding fat and water together so that when you put something in the microwave, it doesn't layer out like your
Oh
microwave
gosh.
lasagna.
Geez, yeah.
Okay. Now, there are natural emulsifiers, like milk has natural emulsifiers. The phospholipids in milk keep the fat and the water together, right?
Gee.
You don't have to shake up a
No, you
bottle of
don't. It's
milk.
always
It's
blended
always there.
nicely.
So there are emulsifiers that do work, but there are also a lot of emulsifiers that turns out don't. Okay. How do you know them? Well, they're on the label, but they have funky names that don't tell you what they are. Like, for instance, mono and diglycidyl esters. Okay. That is an industrial emulsifier called E471. And it turns out E471 has been clearly associated with all the chronic diseases that we've been talking about today. Okay. But the industry doesn't want you to know what they are because otherwise you might not buy them. So they hide them in plain sight on the label. Okay. Another emulsifier that's very famous is lecithin. Now, lecithin comes from food, and it might be that lecithin's okay. But there are different lecithins. There's soy lecithin, which is not as good as sunflower lecithin. The problem is sunflower lecithin is more expensive, so it gets a little bit problematic. All right, another one that is pretty famous is called carrageenan. And carrageenan turns out to be immunogenic and causes gut inflammation by itself. Okay, now, where do you find carrageenan?
So I was
and
going to
ice
ask.
cream.
And
And
Ice
ice cream,
cream.
yeah, it's what
Michelle,
makes
you got to give up your banana barges.
what?
You
it's what
do.
makes it's what makes ice cream fluffy because you're holding fat and water together. Okay, so it turns out carrageenan is a problem.
Mm.
We have to figure out ways to, shall we say, re-engineer food so that it is not a problem. So, can you make ultra-processed food healthy by adhering to these four principles? And the answer is yes, you can. And we've actually been doing it with a company in the Middle East. Okay,
Mm.
it's like the Nestle of the Middle East. It's called KDD, Kuwaiti Danish Dairy. Okay, and they make flavored milks, they make frozen yogurts, they make ice cream, they make confectionery, they make biscuits, they make tomato sauce. Okay, like all bad stuff. Okay, and they wanted to become a metabolically healthy company. And so, working with a scientific advisory group that we put together, I and these other scientists basically revamped KDD's entire portfolio to be metabolically healthy. We've actually studied it. We've figured out a roadmap for other food companies to be able to take in order to fix their ultra processed food to be metabolically healthy. So it's not that ultra processed food is inherently bad. It's our current ultra processed
Mm.
food that is inherently.
Inherently bad.
Okay. You could fix it. They could fix it. Okay. But they haven't decided to do so yet.
Yeah.
But maybe
Hopefully
that will
that's
change.
hopefully
But
that's the yet. That's
I,
yeah,
we don't.
this um it's so easy. Parents just want to get something they can throw in a microwave, they can throw in the oven really quick, you know,
And that's in a pouch or in a bag. Yeah,
and hand it
exactly.
to
And the
their
kid
kids.
can feed themselves. I mean, I understand.
You know,
Look,
I
I'm
know.
a parent too. I know. I lived it as well. Okay, I understand the problems, but the fact of the matter is, the food is killing us,
It is.
and you know, we have to improve our mitochondrial output if we're going to solve this chronic disease debacle. Now, mitochondria need the right food, but they also need oxygen. Okay. You need oxygen in order to be able to, burn, through the Krebs cycle. That's, no oxygen, you're dead.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not actually true. No oxygen, you ferment.
Oh,
Okay. Cancer cells don't need oxygen. Fetal cells don't need oxygen because they're growing, they're not burning.
Mm.
Okay. And it turns out that you can make enough ATP from fermentation through glycolysis. And then you have the structures, the substrates to be able to then turn them into lipids, into ribose, into proteins in order to be able to grow cells. Because fetal cells need to grow because, fetuses are, very fast growing. And also cancer cells are very fast growing. So they don't need mitochondria. They don't want mitochondria. So they need more glucose.
so feed the cancer cells, ferment yourself, keep eating that sugar, keep.
Well, that's right. And so that's one of the reasons why, you know, cancer treatment right now consists of milkshakes with fructose in them. Well, it turns out the fructose is used by the cancer, not by your cells.
The
It's kind
heck?
of like feeding the cancer. Like, how dumb is that? So we have so many misconceptions about the role of nutrition in metabolic health and in systemic and mental health. It's not even funny. But, that's part of my job. That's part of why I'm here talking
Well,
to you.
you're on the task force for the ADA. My gosh, I wish the White House would hire you. Are you going to be?
Well, no comment.
Okay. Okay. Um, with that being said, and I know we got to go here in a minute, and I mean, we could talk to you for hours. Maybe we have a part two. This, for parents listening, you talked about the company KDD that is uh, taking things to a different level to have metabolically favorable foods that are processed, but in a metabolically healthy way.
Right.
we're not there yet, though, in the United
No,
States.
we're
So,
not there yet.
so someone listening right now, they go to the grocery store. We want more fiber. You want less sugar. What are some things that you suggest for now to minimize the damage, to put some of the fire out that they can do?
Very simple.
Shop the
Shop the
outer aisle.
outside of the
Yeah.
shop the outside of the store. Don't go in the aisles. If you've gone off the aisle into the aisles, you've gone off the rails.
And
Because
that's it. That's the reality.
the ultra processed food is hiding.
That is
Because
the reality.
they took the fiber out for shelf life.
We had a Dr. Susan Maples. She's big in
Oh yeah, I
diet.
know Susan very
Okay,
well.
love Susan.
She's one of my best friends.
Oh my gosh. Of course she is. I love her. Susan, I hope you're listening. We love you. Um, she had talked about, changing the diets and, it just takes some time, but as a parent, they want that sweet, sweet, sweet taste, but eventually if you get them on more vegetables, they're going to eventually acquire that taste. It's just going to take some time.
Well, the fact is that sugar, the fructose molecule, desensitizes those taste receptors. So this is work from my colleague, Dr. Monica Deuce at the University of Michigan has shown. Okay, and it takes 3 weeks for those taste receptors to basically come back.
Hmm.
So if you take the sugar out of the food acutely, okay, then the food obviously doesn't taste as sweet because you can't tell that the sugar is there because the receptors have been so downregulated. But if you make it through 3 weeks of an altered diet and then you give somebody a blueberry, okay, basically it's like a sugar bomb going off in your mouth because the taste receptors for sugar have come back.
I have experienced this
Yeah.
personally. No, Stacy, I love ice cream. I haven't had ice cream in months. Um, and
I'm sorry for you,
I'm
but
just
not,
trying to do,
but
yeah,
not.
trying to do different things. And it's changed my whole taste perception to the point where I can't stand my toothpaste.
Too
It's just like,
sweet. It's too sweet.
it's
Too
just,
much. Yeah.
yeah, terrible tasting.
So
Well,
it is fixable. The entire phenomenon is fixable, but we're going to have to, shall we say, either partner or lean on or coerce or possibly even regulate the food industry to do so.
I think and I hope that change is coming. We're seeing some things, hopefully. There's some
Hopefully.
conversations happening and that have never happened before. So hopefully
You
that
know,
leads to action.
we've been trying to make headway on this since my for me since 2007.
Hmm.
It is now 2025. So this is 18 years that I've been trying to make headway on this. And I will tell you, first you have to convince the public that it's a problem. And I think we have done that. We
I
have
think
data to
so.
demonstrate that we have done that. But then the politicians, they politicians lead from behind. Okay. And it took this election, and I'm not, uh, saying plus or minus in terms of the results of the election, but it took this election for uh, parents' concerns to finally be voiced.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. 100%. Robert, I hope we can have you back for a part two because I think there's a part two needed. And I'm going to have links where people can find you and get your books in the podcast. And then I have my 3 rapid fire questions that have nothing to do with anything, but I just want to get to know you more. Um,
Hit
one.
me.
Okay, go ahead, Robert. What were you going to
No,
say?
hit me. Hit me.
Here we go. One. Do you have a hidden talent or a hobby that would surprise us?
Oh, I used to.
What was
I,
it?
I used to sing and act, but I don't anymore.
Oh, well, maybe we got to get you back in.
I've turned that, into lecturing.
Okay. Okay. Number 2. What's the most unusual thing you've ever eaten?
Oh my gosh. Uh, oh, I know. Fugu.
What's fugu?
Fugu.
Yeah.
Fugu is puffer fish. It's got a tetrodotoxin in it. Okay, you can die from it, but it's a delicacy in Japan.
It's how it's prepared, right?
Well, you got to have a certified fugu
You
chef.
got to trust that fugu
Oh,
server.
That's right.
right.
And
That's
the thing
right.
was, I didn't know I was eating it. It was given to me.
Oh, okay. Interesting. They tell you after the fact. Okay.
Right, exactly.
And then what is your favorite book or movie?
Ooh. Okay. My favorite book is Catch-22.
Ooh,
Yeah, because basically it explains why everyone's crazy.
we're kind of living in that, aren't we?
We kind of are. Yeah.
Well, Robert, it has been a pleasure. And I hope we've given some actionable, at least hope to the audience and maybe some encouragement to be, like Dr. Maple says, be a brave parent,
Yeah,
right?
indeed. We
Um,
have to be brave parents. But what that means is you have to have courage. And
yes.
right now, no one's showing any courage.
And you know why? I don't think a lot of people have the courage. I think you have the courage when you feel the urgency to do so. And hopefully, I think some more information is just going to have to come out to show people you got to have the courage to be brave. But why should I have the courage? Show me why I need to have the courage. So hopefully,
Because our kids are sick and dying. That's why.
yes, they are. Yes,
Well,
sir.
we're following your lead. You've been very courageous throughout this 18 years, 17 years. So yeah,
Resilient.
it's high time that we join the movement.
Well, thank you, Robert. We know you have things to do today. We appreciate you so very much, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
My pleasure.